cloud.
I think it's on the more.
Okay, it just started. Okay, so hello, everyone. I'm just going to share our PowerPoint with you. Here's our agenda. It's quite long, and we may not get to everything, but we definitely will get to our presentation on green schools and the neighbors for buses, but we may be kind of quick on some of the other stuff. First of all, we want to go to our ground rules, which are stay on mute if you are not talking. For the Q&A portion, keep questions to 1 minute or less. We will cut you off. What does that mean? I will mute you. And we do ask that if it's a question, please make it a question. If you want to have, a time to rant, you can put that in the chat or you can go on Twitter and do that. But please make it questions and be respectful of the people presenting. And going on to the next slide. Oh, co-chairs, that's me and Jake, who you should be able to see on here. Our treasurer is Paul Basich. Francis Wee, who is the secretary, and also my husband, is in another meeting today, so his apologies. He will be here next time. Our at-large members are Lindsey Sands, Diedrich Asante Muhammad, Percy Lee, Beth Velasquez Sneddon, and Joan Pontius. And I think of those, Joan is the only one in here right now. Joan, you can say hi if you'd like.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
And our new summer intern is Sarah Pan, who I believe is on here. Hi, Sarah. All right.
Hello.
So what is our revolution? These are our priorities. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You can see it on our webpage. Fight corporate greed, good jobs for all, oppose fascism, healthcare justice, racial and immigrant justice, and environmental justice are just a few of the long list of things we stand for. If you want to follow us on social media, you can become a voting member, join our email list. You could go to that link there, or just go on Facebook. We are on there as well, and Twitter, and Our Revolution Maryland. If you go to the website, you can choose your chapter, which would be Howard County chapter. All right. And we just had another person come in. Okay, Treasurer's report. Take it away, Paul.
I'm unmuted. Yes, you read it. It's right there. We've done up to $1,370 today.
Ooh.
The rest stands. The HoCo account from Maryland is held by OR Maryland is $283. The extra cash on hand, virtually in my pocket, is almost 36 bucks. And there we go. It's $1,688.75. $10
Okay.
more here indicated there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Building green schools, the education committee presentation by our Rev HoCo steering committee member and Sunrise HoCo co-chair Lindsey Sands, but it's Lindsey with the I, and I'm going to let her take it away right now. And do we have a PowerPoint for you?
Yes, we do.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and I'll stop sharing mine and you start sharing yours, Jake.
Yeah, okay. I'll pull it up now. But you could, Lindsey and Emily, feel free to introduce yourselves if you want while I'm pulling up the PowerPoint here.
All right. Hi, everyone. Like Kat said, I'm Lindsey from Sunrise Howard County, but also the steering committee of Our Revolution. And I just graduated from Wild Lake.
Congratulations.
I'm Emily. I'm also from Sunrise, and I just graduated from Mount Hepburn.
Well, thank you both. Kat, I'm using my work computer right now, so my thing's a little bit slow, but she emailed it to both of us. If you look up her email, Lindsey Sands at gmail.com. But in the meantime, while we get that pulled up, I don't know if you two have the presentation recited from memory, and you could start launching into it if you want, but it should only take a minute or two as we.
Yeah, I can start because basically we're just going to talk about how this school year has gone for us, because we have been on one mission kind of the entire school year, which has been our climate action plan for the school system. So basically, like you can see in this blurb here, the Howard County public school system is a large part of kind of our impact on the environment government wise, because there are so many government facilities and operations going on that directly impact the environment. So we wanted to, and we saw that the Prince George's County public school system had come out with a climate action plan. So we want to come up with one. So we were like, why can't Howard County do the same? Which is basically the premise for our entire project that we've been working on, and that is still in progress right now. And so just going through the first few slides, I guess, Emily, if you want to talk about who Sunrise is as an organization and what we kind of do.
Someone needs to mute. Yes, please. Give us a back.
Sunrise is a national youth climate justice organization, and we are the Howard County hub of the Sunrise movement. So like Lindsey said, this year we've been focusing on the climate action plan, and it's been led by Lindsey, myself, and another student, Oliver Song. We're all seniors from HCPSS. And we've also been working with central office staff, Dr. Hall and Ms. Reese, who are the heads of the science department within the school system.
Yeah, so I can try to present if you want. My computer's a little slow, but I should be able to. I have it pulled up already.
Okay, yeah, I'll
You have to give me the permissions though. Oh, actually, I think I might have it already.
okay, there you go.
Right? Oh,
I made you a co-host, so you should be able to share your slides.
okay. Let me try now. Screen. I'm on the Zoom page right now, but here's the next. Can you all see everything?
It says you've started screen sharing, but I don't see anything.
Yes.
Kat, I also just oh, there we
There
go.
we go. There we go. We got it.
Okay, cool. So we kind of went through the first two slides already, and okay, yeah. So I guess the first few slides. Here's me, Emily, and Oliver, and then like Emily mentioned, to Dr. Reese and Miss Hall. Dr. Hall and Miss Reese, I mixed that up, but all right. So then basically our original mission and vision were to combat the climate crisis by targeting specific areas of the school system for improvement. So our vision was to develop a plan that the school system could follow in order to reduce some of their negative impacts on the environment. All right. And then Emily, if you want to go over this slide.
Lindsey mentioned the Prince George's County plan earlier. Like she said, that's where we got the idea from. They implemented their own climate action plan for their school system, and it was very elaborate the way they did it. They had a whole work group for everything, and we wanted to create a work group for our process as well, which we did with the research, which we'll get into later. And there was also a climate action plan for the county government. They kind of helped us launch our project off, and we used some of the same focus points that they used in their plan, which we'll also get into later.
So then why specifically we wanted to do an action plan was because we wanted to connect the initiatives going on, because there's initiatives around electric buses and waste, particularly recycling and food waste. And we wanted to kind of incorporate all of those things into the infrastructure and the systems already in place. So then our initial timeline was to create the work group that would do all the research to figure out exactly what should go in the plan by February, which I think we were about on time for. And then I think the work group started like late March. And then we finished our research collection in late May, early June. And then now our next few steps are to finalize the action plan and start implementing the plan.
There are 4 phases of our plan. We just finished the research phase, which had 5 focus points: energy, transportation, land management, waste, and education. I think I said all 5. And we had 5 committees researching each of those. That lasted about 2 to 3 months. And now we're ready to move on to the drafting phase. And after that, we'll be revising the plan to finalize everything, and then the approval process where we have to bring it to the board and get their approval for everything.
So like Emily said, the 5 areas of research were energy, transportation, waste, land management, and education. So basically under each of all of those, we were tackling, like with energy, we're looking at the sources of energy that the school system pulls from. Like if you know that the first, I think, net zero school in Maryland was Wild Lake Middle School, which they did like a bunch of retrofits on, like I think around 2018, a few years ago. And so the school has solar panels in the front and a lot of different cool renewable energy facets about it. But obviously all the other schools are not like that. So looking at how we could get more renewable energy involved. And then secondly, transportation, we were looking at buses, but also important things like idling and different county vehicles, not just the buses. And then also looked at waste, so recycling, trash, and also food waste. And then land management was looking at how we can use the land of the schools for different like greener purposes. And then education was looking at curriculum and how we can incorporate more climate education. So then part 1 of the research was kind of looking at what's the current situation. And they had a bunch of questions in the document that we gave them that they needed to answer. And then part 2 was focusing on what changes can be made. So based on what's already happening now, what needs to be improved or what needs to be removed or whatever the situation is. And so those were also questions on the document. And so yeah. So that's the end of our presentation. And if you had any questions, definitely.
Yes. It's time for the Q&A. Remember what I said, it has to be a question. And in 1 minute, does anyone have a question for Lindsey and Emily?
I have one if no one else is going to go. So you mentioned you were looking at ways to reduce idling. Could you talk about what strategies you were thinking?
We haven't really discussed the specific strategies for everything. I think that's going to be more of what we do in the drafting process. We had our transportation committee. I know they've mentioned it to us. Our student chair has talked to us about how he sees buses idling for a long time. So that's definitely going to be something that we address, but we don't yet have the specific strategies for it.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question?
Sure.
Car idling, are you all looking at that about car rider and pickup lines?
I think we definitely can. I think a lot of it is also going to have to be more user-based, like people who are interacting with the school system, because it's harder to get the budget to adjust to different school system items. And I think also education surrounding like idling and also food waste, I think particularly, and waste in general will be big points to kind of include, whether not being directly in the curriculum, but like having materials and such. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of room for consideration in a lot of things. So
Thanks.
Like Yvonne has her hand up.
Here we go. Yes. So I wanted to know where the money for the solar panels came from at that one school. And then I have a follow-up.
I'm not sure. Well, I think just in the money that they were using for the renovations to the school, they kind of made a bold decision to go completely like net zero and make it the first net zero school in Maryland. So I think it was easier for them to find funds because it was just kind of like a decision they made that was kind of like a precedent, but that precedent didn't increase the amount of schools this was happening to. It just kind of, they were like, that was a really big upfront cost that we don't want to do again. So. And then what's your follow-up question?
So if you had it in your plan to put solar panels in some of the other schools, I'm wondering where the money might come from. I mean, since this was already in there because the school was being renovated.
That's one issue.
It's always
that-
about money.
Yeah, we've actually talked a lot about this with the HCPSS energy manager. And we've come into, I think our biggest budgeting problem has been with energy and solar panels. We're not sure that solar panels will be the direct path we're going to take. It might look more like looking into the energy provider or some separate solar project. They are coming up with an energy resolution that we're going to put into the plan to address that. So it's still, we're still not quite certain how it will play out, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Anyone else with a hand up? I'm looking. No, it looks like we're all good.
I see Sarah has
Oh,
her hand. Just not
Sarah,
with the
okay,
hand raised.
yes.
So
Thank you.
Worthington Elementary, they don't use the solar energy off of the solar panels right next to the elementary school. Is that what I'm getting?
They use those panels for the school, I'm pretty sure, but I don't think they use it for any other schools. They might use it for Wildwood High School too, because they're right next to each other, but I'm not sure exactly which schools it goes to, but I'm pretty sure it goes to the middle school at the very least.
Oh, so it goes to Ellicott Mills.
No, Wild Lake.
Were the solar panels right next to Worthington Elementary?
Oh, I don't know about those.
Okay, there's a former dump and like right next to Worthington Elementary. That's like stacked with solar panels on top of it. We may want to find out like if the solar panels are like going to Worthington.
Yeah, I didn't know there were any other solar panels in the school system. I don't know.
It was because like I mean Worthington Elementary was pretty much built next to a dump.
That's interesting. Yeah, I did not know that.
Okay, I see Paul's hand is up.
Yeah, quick comment and an associated question. I was on one of those 5 committees, as Lindsay and Emily may remember. I was on the landscape committee, and I noticed 2 other people on this call, Bob Marietta and Ruth Alice White, who are on some committee, one or more of the 5 committees. My comment is, I found it very interesting that it was a 3-part campaign or a 3-part project with 3 different categories. Engaged, active students, mostly Sunrise oriented, administrative bureaucrat types who want to do good, and that's fine, and adult environmentalists like yours truly, Bob and Ruth Alice. And I found that combination particularly creative and a good model. I'm just wondering how you assess, Lindsey and Emily, that working out in terms of those 3 parts, and whether that's something that could be replicated.
We definitely stole that idea from the PG County Action Plan. They have a really cool website detailing everything that they did. And so they took people from their school system, they took students, they took teachers, they took other administrators, and they took community members and parents and built the work groups. So that's kind of the idea we wanted to go off from the beginning, because we definitely wanted student voice involved, but we also wanted as broad a net cast as possible to kind of allow for different voices to be inserted and to hear the best opinions, and also including the administrators. It created a bit more of a challenge, I think, because they were less, they knew more, but they were less kind of, because they knew more, they kind of saw more of the difficulties, and it kind of created a kind of a harder way to be more ambitious with the project. But I think it definitely balanced out, because the students were kind of like the opposite kind of, why can't we do it? So even if they were saying, no, we can't do that, students were saying like, well, why not? And so it was kind of a really interesting dynamic I think I saw a lot.
If I may add on that last point, we had a terrific member who was an add-on on our subcommittee on land management, a guy by the name of Brandon Sands, no relation to you, Lindsey, I take it. But he's in charge of landscaping and stuff and around the schools and planting trees and bushes. And he was very responsive, probably because he came to Howard County Public School System from Parks and Recreation. And he was taking those skills and talents and bringing them to us. And we found them at the end of our time that we were doing stuff. So I think finding talent and creating networks was a really important lesson that we found out. So I just want to toss that in for everyone's consideration.
And we have a question from Ruth.
Yes, a key part of getting the PG County Climate Action Plan passed was a huge engagement of the larger public. At what phase will that happen? And do you think that anything really ambitious can be achieved without it?
That will most likely happen during the approval phase, because that's when we're going to need the public support, so the board can see that everybody wants our plan passed. We might publicize it more beforehand. It's been publicized a bit already with the research phase, because we had to let the community know that this was happening in order to recruit people. But we definitely will let the community know more about it, because we will need their support in order for it to be passed.
Okay, well, thank you for the presentation. I think we're ready to move on to ways to get involved with our revolution. And I have a dog watching. Sorry, I'm gonna.
I saw Joan put one thing at the very end, one question. It looks like.
Yeah, sorry. But we have time for that. I wondered if Lindsey or is it Emily could make a more general comment about Sunrise and tell us about Sunrise and the scope of your concerns. For example, are you focusing mostly on greenhouse gas emissions, or is it more general, looking at a climate action plan in terms of things like extreme weather events and other threats associated with climate change?
I feel like the organization as a whole is very, well, because it started to back the Green New Deal as a student voice to back the Green New Deal, but now it shifted focus because that's less of the train we're on right now. And I know last year or the year before that, they were pushing for Green New Deals for municipalities, which is kind of also where we got this idea, because they were doing that shift anyway. And we saw the PG County plan, and it kind of came together. But they were kind of advocating for more local legislation in terms of comprehensive climate legislation, whether that be for school systems or local governments. So I think it does encompass a lot of things, not just greenhouse gas emissions. And I think it's also because also the organization is involved in non-climate related issues as well, because it recognizes the intersectionality of different social justice as well. So I think there's definitely room to advocate for issues that are tangentially related to greenhouse gases and emissions and just climate change.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so now I guess we'll go to the next slide. There are many ways to get involved with us. We have an education issues committee that Paul is kind of leading, and other people from the steering committee. County legislation committee that Joan is going to be leading, who just spoke just now. We have a social event committee that Percy is leading. And you can see we have state legislation, CA board watch committee. We're going to be knocking doors, and there will be lots of opportunities for people who like to do that, what we call canvassing. And we're going to be starting with rent stabilization, hopefully sometime in August. And social media, which I'm hoping our intern is going to do a lot of that for us, which is
Kat,
Sarah.
you might have to share your screen again, I think.
Oh, it's not sharing. Okay, sorry.
No worries.
Thank you. Can you guys see it now? Okay. So here's all the ways you can get involved, and you can see electoral committee. We have a lot of people are interested in that. I think Ken is on the phone on this call. Ken Stevens, who sends me almost weekly emails about what's going on. And we'll have a Google form to sign up for interest if you are interested in it. So I'm going to go to the next slide. We have an education issues committee, and of course, number one on there was our building green schools, which we just had. And there's a long list of others that we are going to have. And Paul is thinking about food as a human right in August. September and October, we might do something on healthcare with Mark. And you can see there's a whole list of things, but I'm going to go quickly because I want to make sure we cover everything in this meeting. So next slide. What have we been up to? Well, Jake just testified on the Dynamic Neighborhoods HoCo by Design, which is coming up. And maybe Jake can go ahead and unmute himself and tell people what that is.
Yeah, HoCo by Design. It's actually a very big deal. It's I think most counties in Maryland do this, but every 10 years. Well, so Howard County has a 20-year general plan that is like a 20-year long-term vision of how they're going to develop Howard County over the next 20 years. And they update it every 10 years. And so basically, this is the year where they're going to update it. And they've been working on this update for a long time now. And I think they're finally going to pass the final version in October later this year. And so they're just now having public hearings for people in the community, different organizations to come testify about their feedback about the current draft of HoCo by Design. And just real quick, HoCo by Design, the summary is it's a continuation of all of the problems that have been hurting our county for decades at this point, mainly developer corruption, and just increasing residential development, and not in an affordable way, and not in a way that is at pace with infrastructure like schools, hospitals, public transportation, other community needs. And so we want to encourage as many people as possible to please sign up to testify for these public hearings. I meant to add to the slide, I think the next one is July 17th at 7 p.m. and we'll send out an email. We already have sent out an email actually with a link to sign up to testify for that. It's on a different set of chapters, but I strongly encourage people to do that on July 17th. We should be doing that, whether it's me, Kat, or Joan, or somebody else. We should be testifying. I encourage other people to do so too. Thank you, Kat.
So moving on. Upcoming events, of course, every Monday, it's not every Monday now, it's 8:30 p.m. Our Revolution National, it's sort of bi-weekly organizing called, and it's happening tonight. And if you click on that, sign up here, or you just go to Our Revolution, you can find the link to their monthly or bi-weekly meeting. Monday, August 7th at 7 will be our next Rev HoCo monthly meeting. The September meeting will probably be on September 11th because of that Labor Day overlap. But
Yes, even the August one, there's a good chance may actually be August 14th. We might switch to second Mondays of the month instead of first Monday of the month. But so be on the lookout for potential.
Yeah, we'll definitely email you. Updates on efforts of unionizing Starbucks employees in Ellicott City. A bunch of us were there last Saturday, and I believe they are having their official vote on July 6th. We're expecting to have that pass. And so that's a safe place to go to Starbucks. You'll have an actual union barista serve you your coffee. And that's the one on Route 40. I guess it's considered Ellicott City.
And I didn't get a chance to add this either, but it looks like they were encouraging people to come and watch the vote happen on July 6th, though I don't know what time the vote is happening, but people can check their Twitter.
Yeah, check your Twitter, and we'll probably post it on our Facebook. Okay. So we've had some interesting things happening in Montgomery County, which is our neighboring city where I actually work. A lot of LGBTQ plus hate. Montgomery County recently passed a policy to make their curriculum more inclusive of LGBTQ plus friendly content, which triggered a major backlash from some of the conservative and religious groups. I won't say all of the religious groups are right-wing, but some of them are, including lawsuit attempts to challenge the policy in court. Attacks have now escalated beyond just mere lawsuits attempting to try to get the policy killed to the outright burning of LGBTQ plus allied flags and heated protests at Montgomery County Board of Education meetings. Well, I can tell that Jake wrote this far-right nut jobs. Not sure if I'd call them that, but definitely people are a little unhinged. Are also showing up to drag queen story hour events for children. Most recent was in Rockville, and it's on YouTube if you care to look for it. There are two videos, one where he is harassing a drag queen story hour, and another one where he's just harassing librarians because they have a Pride Month display. And it's an attempt to intimidate people who are going to those events, intimidating library staff, and an attempt to get them canceled. And I would say an attempt to get more followers for their YouTube stations. So there's that. Please consider signing this petition in solidarity with the LGBTQ plus community in Montgomery County and show support for inclusive curriculum policy that is causing all of this far-right backlash. And my answer to all those people who are upset with the public schools, you don't have to go to them. There is a choice. You may go to a private school or religious school or homeschool. That's also an option. And I am going to try and stop sharing this so I can share the bus presentation. And we have a presenter, Corinne Happel, who should be in here. And
I'm here. Thank you so much.
I'm going to try and get your PowerPoint. Let me get out of
Thank
here.
you.
All
And
right.
I'm happy to start talking while you load that up, Kat.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. So I am Corinne Happel. I am a physician by training, board certified in pediatrics, and then specializing in allergy and immunology. I'm not a politician. I've never done an effort like this before. I came to this because, this bus advocacy started because at the end of March, the week before spring break, I found out that I'm a mother of 5 children, ages 9 and under, that our school bus was not happening next year. And I read through a lot of policies. I thought it was a mistake. We live over a mile away from our elementary school. And after reading policies and calling multiple people, I found out that no, it was not a mistake, that they had indeed canceled thousands of children's school buses. And there had never been a public hearing. There had never been public input, a request for broad public input, and that I was actually not the most significantly affected, that there were a lot of people who are in a lot worse cases than I was. And that started my efforts to try to get this changed. And so I'm going to walk you through the policy, how it started, what the changes were. I'm going to show, if the slides do come up, I'll show you a few maps because I do think it's useful to understand that there is the way the policy is worded, it allows the head of transportation to slash service wherever it is convenient and not to create a uniform rule that parents can argue against. It is, oh, there we go. So I'll start, if you go to the second slide, agenda. There you go. Oh, this is an old, hold on. Is this what I just sent you, Jake?
Yes, this was, I think you sent it to me at like 6:25.
Let me see. Can you go to the very last slide, Kat? It's just showing up as if this is an older version of what?
Yeah, this is actually me. That's
Maybe you should give Corinne a co-host and let her.
So unfortunately, my PowerPoint, I need to fix something because it won't let me screen share. We could try right now, but I've had 2 recent presentations where I've had to have folks present. Can I try resending it to you real quick?
yeah,
Is that a
works.
problem, Jake? Okay.
That works.
Let me files, save as.
I just made you co-host if that's going to be better. Jake actually didn't send me the slides, so I can't share it. It was a message without them.
And I apologize. Today is the day I work at an academic center, and we today is the day where we get our new trainees. July is we do a July calendar year at hospitals. Okay, so that should save here and then place it. And then I'll send it again.
And yeah, if you could actually send it to Kat too, if you could, Kat,
Sure.
if you want email address,
Yeah,
in the chat.
put it in the chat. Now everyone will have it. Okay. Not that half the world doesn't already have this. Okay.
I also just forwarded it to you with the attachment, I think now, Kat.
Oh, I see. I think I sent you all an old version. It looks like. I apologize for that. Okay, so this should have.
Oh, you sent it to my Google. Okay. I'm getting that.
Well, she's pulling up the more recent one, so.
Okay, oh, okay, all right.
Jake, did that just go through?
Give me 1 second.
I don't know, is this the right one? July 3rd, 2023?
No, okay, I just got the new one. I'm gonna forward it to you, real quick, Kat.
Okay.
Go. All right. You should have it now. Sorry about those technical difficulties, folks.
I'm sorry too for the earlier draft. I had been asked to speak for the River Hill community and I had prepared some slides for them and I wanted to make updates, which I did for a broader audience tonight. So
Hopefully this is the right one.
no.
No.
Or no, I just sent to you at 7:44 p.m. Kat.
Okay.
There should be pictures on the very first slide too. Just
I have one at 7:45. Let me share this one.
thank you. That looks great.
That looks good. Yay.
Yes.
Okay.
My 5-year-old in kindergarten, we've been talking about a lot about school buses and my kids have gotten very involved too. All of the school age kids have presented to the school board about their concerns. And that picture on the right is my 5-year-old who has been talking, we've been talking so much about school buses that she drew, colored a school bus at school. So I thought that was a good one to include. It's been on a lot of children's minds as their families have been talking about it and as their families have been trying to figure out plans for the upcoming school year. So I'm going to talk about what the policy changes are, again, how they happened without community input. And now I'm going to talk about equity concerns and safety concerns that have been overwhelming throughout the community. And then finally, I'm going to end with our petition, which we do have a proposed solution. We had another petition a few weeks ago that we sent out, and now we're actually, that was actually asking for more answers and more communication from the school board. And now we're actually asking the school board for a specific change that I'll talk about at the end. And there's a QR code. If anyone would like to participate in our petition, we definitely need all the support we can get. We're a grassroots movement, we're not, and we all do this as a volunteer effort. So we don't have any paid people on our team or anything like that. All right, so that's the overview. Next slide. So the how we decide which in Howard County, who gets school buses and who does not get school buses is Transportation Policy 5200. There was last year in May of 2022 a unanimous board decision to change this policy significantly, and there was never a public hearing. So typically the protocol for policy changes when they're significant is to include some form of public input. And for whatever reason, the board chose not to. When you look at their policy, it is recommended that you have a public hearing, but it is not the way it's worded. It could not be held. There's no legal implication if they chose not to have a public hearing. So they made a change. There was never a public hearing. And the actual changes were not shown to families or implemented really until March of this year. So a couple days before spring break, families received an email that was very vague. The title was vague. It said non-transportation areas for the 23-24 school year. So distance changes for pre-K students. It used to be that anyone who was over half a mile would get a school bus. Now you have to be over a mile away. From kindergarten to grade 5, your elementary school children, that has always been a mile, but they significantly changed it. So now it's more than a mile, but the language is still, it's a mile. For middle schoolers, it went from 1 mile to 1.5 miles. For high schoolers, it went from 1.5 to 2 miles. But the other thing that changed significantly was how the measurements were being made, particularly for the elementary school children. It used to be that the distance was calculated by how far it would be for you to walk from your front door to the front door of the school. And now per policy changes, they take you from the property line of your apartment complex or condominium unit, which can be pretty extended from the front door, to the property line of the school that's closest to your home. So even though kindergarten to grade 5 students were, the idea was pitched as everything's the same for elementary, it actually affected a lot of students, so that now more than 1/3 of the total school bus cuts, as you might be hearing people in the community concerns being raised, more than 1/3 are actually affecting elementary age school children. That's over 1,000 children suddenly do not have school bus service that had it before. Next slide. The part of the policy is not that is being implemented differently is not new policy. So in that they're extending where it's convenient boundaries beyond that 1 mile or beyond that 1.5 mile. I have a few maps to show you all. Language that was new is that the transportation office may at its sole discretion. So this is very authoritarian. They can go in and just say, we don't feel like covering your neighborhood, and so we're not going to adjust if deemed necessary to ensure the overall efficiency of the school bus routes. And this bothers a lot of families because you never in a school classroom say, well, for efficiency, we're not gonna teach this child. You're trying to cover, you're trying to include everyone. But in this situation, they will, if a neighborhood extends pretty far back, most of the neighborhood is less than a mile. They want to cut the whole neighborhood from service. Even homes that are 1.3 miles away won't get covered. Next slide. The other thing that it does is it significantly changes how far away a bus stop can be from home. And people do not realize this yet because they have not told the public how they're implementing this part of the policy. So this prior school year, bus stops were no more than 1/2 mile from home. So a lot of families would have 1/4 mile or more to get to their bus stop, but it was never more than 1/2 mile for a standard bus stop. Bus stops now can be as far as 1 mile away for elementary school students, 1.5 mile away from home for middle schoolers, 2 miles away for home for high schoolers. And those locations won't be known until August. So as I start to talk about some of the concerns that people have raised about safety and equity, those problems are going to be compounded if they truly implement the policy and push these bus stops as far back as they're allowed to. And based on the way they've made school bus cuts, we do think that it is likely that they intend to use these much more liberal bus stop locations in terms of how far away they are from home. Next up. Thank you. They added mandatory school bus registration, which I've spoken of before. I actually think this is a good part of the policy. It asks for people to register for school bus service. The deadline was June 1st. They extended it to June 15th. They finally did get 95% of kids to fill out, or families to fill out, whether or not they plan to use bus service. And then they made the assumption that those 5% that did not, what they're telling the public is that they make the assumption that those 5% who did not register, they will give them service. So there were a lot of concerns that those kids, if you didn't sign up in time, that you would suddenly lose your school bus service. It seems like that's not the intention or the way they're implementing that part of the policy. It's not part of the policy that I'm personally concerned about. I think it helps us efficiently use resources in the community. Next slide. So I wanted to show a little bit more information about who this affects. So next slide. There, as a board certified pediatrician, I have big concerns that there is a disproportionate effect on Title I schools versus other schools. So there's a list of schools that are affected in with non-transportation areas. So I'm sorry, this is a list of all schools. And then if there's 1 star by the school, that means they have a new non-transportation area, which means there is going to be less bus service next year for that school than there was this past year. And if there's no star by that name, the school, it will, it means that that school is not affected. If there's 2 stars by that school's name, it means it's not affected as well, but 2 stars implies that those schools don't actually have any non-transportation area. So as you look at it, the schools in a lot of these schools are in the western part of Howard County, not Title I schools. So you have Manners Woods Elementary, you have Triadelphia Ridge, you have West Friendship, you have Bushy Park, and you have Dayton Oaks. And for many people who understand that the way schools work, those are not the Title I, or understand the schools in Howard County, the map of where these schools are. Those are not where our higher free and reduced meal program student recipients are. And so there's concern that, again, that the schools that are most affected are the ones who are the least likely to be able to afford private transportation or help in the event of bad weather. The schools where there is more chronic absenteeism and other concerns. So which elementary schools are affected? I made red boxes around the Title I schools that are affected. There are 9 out of 13, I'm sorry, the red boxes is around all the Title I schools. 9 out of 13 Title I elementary schools are affected, so that's 69% versus 48% of our non-Title I elementary schools. So equity is a huge concern in this whole policy change. When we initially raised this concern, the week after spring break, we held a small protest, and from the beginning, we raised concerns that the children would be most affected were the ones that didn't really have a good way out. And when the board press to the transportation office, was equity assessed? Indeed, equity had never been assessed for any of these policy changes, and that's been publicly on the record. So a lot of concern just when you're creating such a big policy change that you didn't even in the beginning think about which children this would affect most, who could potentially be harmed. And in this case, we do think that the kids that are going to be harmed most are the ones who are least able to afford a change. Next slide. So there was a lovely article in the Wild Lake High School newspaper that someone shared with me this week. It took the non-transportation area map. So the school provided what's highlighted in black, the school provided that. And then the red on top, those are annotations from the Wild Lake writer, Amy Manzanares, and whoever else was working with her on this story. What this shows is that as there are areas where so 2 miles is the walk radius for a high school, but as you can see, there's areas where it extends 2.3 or 2.1 miles, and the only way to know what the new parts of the non-transportation zones are is to manually go in and compare it to last year's bus locator records. So this actually takes quite a bit of work to go in manually and add addresses in and figure out on a map how far away they are. And Jake, I think I'm actually going to have you, just for sake of time, kind of push through the next few slides. There's a lot of maps that I'm willing to show people later. You're welcome to go through, but lots of schools, not just one, are affected beyond that radius. So the next couple slides, Jake, if you don't mind, so Clarksville Elementary has a large, actually pause here for a second. So hazard buses, so that's what Howard County calls buses to areas without a reasonably safe walking route to school, will continue. Some of them were canceled. That's a separate problem. But sidewalks are not required. So there are neighborhoods where there are not sidewalks, and students are still required to walk extended distances on non-sidewalk, so in the road, to get to school. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. River Hill, there's an area going 2.7 miles to the high school that a lot of folks were concerned about. Next slide. So safety concerns, we have a lot of safety concerns. One of them is that we already have a lot of students who are taking or being driven to school from the current walk zone. So some families choose to drive even in the shorter distances. So as you increase the walk radius, more children who have access to a private vehicle will use one. And a lot of the car rider loops are already overwhelmed with safety concerns. Our local middle school had a child struck in the car pickup line this past spring, and it was very traumatic for everyone who witnessed. Luckily, the child did okay, but this is not something that we want to promote continuation of in the future, just some of the safety concerns. And so suddenly adding more vehicles to these problems without solutions is a concern. There will be more children walking and cycling extended distances for timed intervals where potential predators could be waiting for them or watching and knowing the routes that these children are taking. And this happens even in poor weather. And so it gives a very easy way for a stranger to approach a child and say, hey, it's raining, don't you want to ride to school? And in bad weather, it certainly makes a child more vulnerable to harm. The new non-transportation areas were not physically examined for safety. So some hazard buses were canceled. So again, those school buses that used to go to areas where there was concern, or they go to areas where there's not a good walking route, some of them were removed without a physical inspection of the actual route. And then the current process, so the school is now advertising because of all these safety concerns. They're saying, hey, go walk your route and tell us if there's any safety concerns. But the current process requires that the child have an advocate to speak out for them. And if they don't, then their walking route will not physically get assessed for safety. And then the pediatrician in me is really concerned that what's going to happen is the same thing that happened during the pandemic, but I think an even more dangerous way, is that we're going to have more unsupervised children. And that's going to increase the risk of child death. So more than a third of the bus cuts affect elementary school children. In Maryland, leaving a child under the age of 8 is considered neglect. But then to prevent death from a car vehicle collision with a pedestrian, it is recommended that children under 10 even have someone walk with them to school. And then a supervising caregiver would need to walk almost 5 miles from some of these new extended distances per day. So it'd be 1.2 miles to go to school, 1.2 miles to get back. And then again, you would repeat that in the afternoon to pick up the child. And when you're talking about families who are on hourly wage jobs, they can't afford the time to do that, and they don't have the money to hire someone to drive the kid. So in many cases, we predict that what happened during the pandemic for some of those families is they would leave a child unsupervised at a house to do their online learning. And similarly, we think that this will happen for some of these children who are now suddenly walkers, who families for years have relied on transportation. Next slide. So there's a lot of unknowns about school bus contractors for the next year. There's a big company from $1 billion company from California called Zum that was hired for most of the bus routes. Supposedly there's going to be some more information this week. I haven't heard anything. I don't have an insider scoop on any of what's going on behind the scenes, but our local bus contractors were basically not, there was a lot, most of the contracts for next year most of the bus routes have been given to this large $1 billion company, and the prior bus contractors have been left out of the loop in terms of that new contracts and what's going to happen for the new school year. Next slide. So our proposed solution is that there have been overwhelming safety concerns presented by the community, by many people from many schools. And we also have many concerns about equity. And so we are recommending that we know that the school board, when you read their policy on making policies, policy 2020, we read that the school board believes that any sound policy requires public input. And because the public has come forward, we were never given a chance to speak out before the policy was made. Now we are speaking out. We believe that the bare minimum that the board can do, and what we think they should do, is to suspend all bus cuts for at least 1 year, find a way to make that happen, And during that 1 year, we want them to better assess safety for all the new non-transportation areas. We want them to physically assess routes for children, even those that don't have advocates, with parents calling the transportation office with safety concerns. And then we also never had a chance for the public to have input, and we would like there to be public brainstorming for alternative solutions that don't require any bus cuts. And then after that committee convenes, we'd like to have a public hearing for public input. And that is actually part of that second piece, is also promoting safety, because school buses, per the National Highway Safety Traffic Administration, are the safest way for children to get to school. So if you cut school bus service, you are decreasing child safety, whether you are creating a bad route or there's other safety concerns beyond that, but just cutting access to school bus will decrease safety in our county. So we think that the public should be part of the brainstorming process to think of any other alternatives that the school system could pursue before they choose that route. And we don't have a very long timeline. July 13th is the last board meeting before the new school year. So we think if they're going to act, they need to act now in order to prevent harm. Last slide, Jake. So we have a QR code that you can use to read the petition. And I encourage all of you to think about signing it, and also to share it with your friends, colleagues, coworkers, organizations that you might be a part of. We do have a Twitter account, and we have a Facebook page. I'm mostly the one writing and posting on those accounts. And I'm happy to take any questions or discussion.
And you'll be marching in the 4th of July parade tomorrow,
I
right?
am. That's where your 4th of July. Don't kiss school bus service goodbye. So we've made over 2,000 little handouts that have a little Hershey's kiss on them that we will be passing around. The River Hill Community Association, the village, they invited us to march in the parade. So there'll be about 13 of us that'll be marching with posters and handing out QR codes, trying to get the word out.
Okay, we have a few questions. I think Yvonne had her hand up first, so go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know whether you know the answer to this, but at some point, the county probably had their own buses and their own drivers. So do you know when they shifted over to hiring private companies to outsourcing this?
I don't know the history of that. I know in recent history, there are local private contractors, and they have relied on Howard County for their work. And they've bought school buses, they've invested in infrastructure to keep those buses running. And a lot of them, if you read the local newspaper stories that have been running, a lot of the school bus contractors feel that they have been harmed by this new contract with an out-of-state company.
So because, well, I worked for many, many years in Prince George's County. And of course, they don't contract out the buses. I'm not saying there are no problems, but the bus drivers are employees of the county school system. And they negotiate their own contract, and the buses belong to the school system. I'm supposing that to contract out the service costs more money than to have your own drivers and your own buses. That's why I asked the question as to when. I'm almost positive that they started out with their own buses and their own drivers. So it'll be interesting to find out. Because now they're spending a lot of money on this new company. Probably costs more than even the local ones.
It does cost more. It does.
There you go. So that's why they're now making the cuts.
That
I
is,
mean, it
that is
just
one
doesn't make
concern a lot of
sense.
families have of if we're spending what's been reported in the newspapers is Zoom is getting $1,000, $17,000 per route versus about $75,000 per route, which is what local contractors have gotten in the past. And local contractors say that they have asked for a raise to $85,000 per route so that they could provide better wages to their workers. And Howard County public school system came back and said that was too expensive historically, as recently as this within the last 12 months. And so families are looking at the news saying, why are you picking this more expensive company? There's still a lot that many of us feel like has not been answered. And when the board and when the school system have been asked in public meetings, they allude to mediation that they're undergoing with the government. I'm sorry, with these contractors, and the bus contractors are saying that no mediation is going on right now. So it's not clear to me. I think these discussions are happening behind the scenes, and I'm unfortunately not privy to the details of any of that.
So I just want to add one more thing.
Sure.
Normally, and I would think even in the surrounding counties, and Kat, you may know what's going on in Montgomery County, but normally the amount that a student can walk is 1 mile. You go over the mile and a bus comes to get you. 1 mile. So I'm surprised, shocked more that it's going over 2 miles, 2 or more. Because that's
So
crazy for an elementary school child.
Yes, so the elementary school students, it's over a mile. So they're adding, some students will get service if they're a little over a mile, and some elementary school students, because of their location in a neighborhood, they're cutting you even 1.3 miles away from the elementary school. High schoolers are the ones who are being cut 2 miles, but then it's beyond, as I showed on the Wild Lake map, the River Hill map. That is the worst policy in the state. Montgomery County and PG County use 2 miles, but they don't extend it the way that Howard County is extending it. And they also go door to door. They don't do property line to property line, which adds significant distance as well. So there are counties that use more than a mile, but now for high school, we're actually going to be the worst the way we're implementing the policy.
All right, I'm going to go to the next person. Looks like Sarah has a question.
So, our children, even the best and brightest, haven't been taught not to hitchhike. I know that this sounds really silly, but I've been asked for rides from the young ladies to high school. I probably look like a nice lady, but like hitchhiking is still a deal, and we need to take that into consideration. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And the schools just don't teach that anymore. Like, don't hitchhike.
And I would go a step further. So it's not just don't hitchhike, don't create a situation where a child really wants to hitchhike. So if you are so tired of walking 2 miles and it's raining, you're going to ask for help sometimes, or accept help, even if you're like, oh, are they safe or not? For better or worse,
People have
some
looked at me
children will
and
do
like
that.
young ladies. I mean, it was just one time, but a young lady looked at me and she was like, "Can you give me a ride to school?" And it was just like, are you serious? Like, sure, but like, I mean, it was just a few years ago, and I was just like, do you know not to ask that? And then too, me and my son, we walked to school to Worthington, and people don't realize, I think we've had this conversation online. I've had this conversation online with some people, and like, I walk with him every single day. And like one day in January, the weather was so bad that our umbrella actually turned inside out. And because there was wind and rain, like cold rain, and this other kid's umbrella went like sailing into the carpool lane. And like he started screaming and crying. And it was just chaotic. And my son like started running home because he was terrified. And it's just really some days the weather is just very bad. So I mean, that was a day that the weather was just horrible because it was windy and rainy and cold.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna just stop you there because I have 3 more questions and we're almost
yeah,
at the
so
end
I'm
of our
gonna,
meeting.
yeah, okay, bye. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you for,
Sarah Pan, go ahead.
So I have 2 questions. I heard from my friend that during the 2021 to 2022 school year, which that year she was in middle school, that her bus got taken away. And for reference, she lived like 1.4 miles, and this was taken from Google Maps away from the school. And I was wondering if there was a certain policy passed during that year modifying the bus guidelines, and if so, how much it changed from like an older policy. And my second question is, do you know how effective changing the contractor will be in addressing the bus driver shortages?
oh, wow. So in 2021, there was a very minor policy change to policy 5200. That's the transportation policy that determines which kids get school buses and which kids don't. There was not any increase to the transportation radius. What's interesting about that year's policy is they went through formal review and they also had a public hearing for this minor policy change. They had a public hearing. So one person showed up and basically said, I'm glad you changed glad to happy. And that was it. And they changed the policy. And this was a very significant one. And they never went through that process. They'd never invited the public to the decision-making process. So your friend is probably lost her bus service because of something called coordination of services, where can I ask, was the 1.4 miles for high school, or was it, do you know what grade level your friend was in?
At that time, she was in 8th grade.
In 8th grade, so she lost it while she was a middle schooler?
I think so.
And the walking path was 1.4 miles last year?
I took the car path from Google Maps, so I'm not sure if
So
there's
they're
a
not using
different
the car path. You can use the walk math on Google Maps is a pretty good estimate. They have some fancier program that they use for more exact calculations than Google Map, but Google Maps pretty good for your walking distance. If you do the car distance, because of the way, like they may require you to use a Columbia Association path, for example, and that wouldn't be a car path. And so that could change. So the old policy was 1 mile for middle schoolers. So my suspicion is it was 1.4 miles looking at a map because it was including a walking path that wasn't a driving path. The other thing, I'm sorry, going back to what I was starting to talk about with coordination of services is a lot of, because the school doesn't want to pay for as many school buses. School bus is usually the second most expensive thing in a school budget. So salaries are going to be, your staff salaries is going to be the biggest bite out of your budget, out of most budgets in the United States. The second biggest is going to be your transportation budget for most school districts. So they're always looking for ways not to cover as many, for better or worse. And so one of the things that they do is they do have a lot of hazard buses. And again, those are the buses that go to homes where there's not a safe walking route to school. And they say, well, if we create the small walking path from this distance to this distance, then we think it's safe enough. Or we add this crosswalk and this crossing guard. And so over the last few years, the transportation office has been doing that, where they've been coordinating with the county. They've been adding small safety improvements and then cutting school bus services after. So if your friend lost school bus service in 2021, it was probably related to recognition that there was a new safety measure that was physically in place, where the transportation office felt it was safe enough, and then they took away the hazard bus that used to go there.
We have another question from Emily.
I was just wondering, and sorry if you addressed this already, but when did the school system inform the public about this whole transportation situation, and how much did they tell everyone? Because what I'm noticing is that for policies that would have a lot of pushback from the public, they often don't give much information away about what they're doing. Like with the teacher cuts, just a month ago, I think, they weren't even going to tell some of the teachers that their position had been cut until they've already made the decision. I don't think they had many public hearing opportunities for that either. So I was just wondering how much they've told the public.
Yeah, so I'm an informed parent who tries to read all of those emails that the school sends us. They send a lot of emails. There was no public hearing for this policy change. So the board voted in May of 2022. Prior to that, if you were not watching school board meetings, you would not have been invited to the decision-making process. You wouldn't have even known. And so there was one person that spoke that night during public forum. And I encourage you all to be aware of this, because I certainly didn't know this, is that at any school board meeting, most school board meetings, you can go and talk about any topic that you want to for 3 minutes. It's called public forum. You can stand up and say, I don't like this about the school, or I love this about the school. Let's keep doing this. It's great. You have 3 minutes to speak your mind. And there was one person who had been following the minutes, or maybe was somehow otherwise an insider, and he spoke against the policy. And he said it's an inauspicious start to such a drastic change to not invite the public to the conversation. And he was so right. I only know that because I went back as I've been trying to figure out how they did this and when they did this, that I was watching the meeting from that night. So I would agree, they didn't want our opinion. They didn't want, and that's concerning. That's a big problem, especially when their own policy 2020 describes that sound decision-making relies in part on public input. They didn't receive it here. So we found out as people, the public was informed by emails sent to families labeled non-transportation areas for the 23-24 school year. They were designed for, the messaging was designed for a very educated native speaker. So even within our current communities, we think there are people who do not understand what's happening to the school bus cuts. Those were released at the end of March of this year. And it's been challenging. So March, everyone was about to head to spring break. That's when they released the information, because they had a whole week not to respond to emails. And they had a whole week that was very hard for us. We immediately found out and started to advocate for change pretty quickly on. And it's very hard to organize people when people are leaving on vacation. And then you come back from spring break and it's the end of the school year, and there's all the end of the school year activities. And so again, it's very hard to organize grassroots movements when, and I think they know that. I think they did that knowing that it would be easier to silence an issue that they didn't want to talk about publicly. Oh, and I'm sorry, in the previous question, I think it was a 2 question, there was a question of, would the California-based company help address the driver shortage? The driver shortage, so they're basically trying to recruit current drivers that work for local bus contractors. They've advertised saying you could keep your same bus route if you come to us and use our buses and get managed by our company. So it's not clear that they're inventing new drivers. They are recruiting and they're trying to recruit and hire new drivers and train new drivers, but it's not clear to me that they have some novel strategy that local contractors don't have access to. And some local bus drivers are so loyal to their current contractors that they are either leaving the profession altogether, retiring, or going into another driving type position because they feel like it's distasteful to work for a different company. And that's a shame for such we need more bus drivers.
And Paul has a question. That's the last question.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation, very informative. I have a quick question, especially considering time considerations. Have you had any success reaching out to, say, concerned teachers, for example, through the Howard County Education Association?
I have not reached out to the Howard County Education Association. It has felt that's a good idea, actually. I have found that some PTAs have wanted to be vocal, and it has taken a while for them to organize and express their concerns. And I have found that some PTAs, well, it's also summer now, have either been hard to reach, or my own PTA didn't want to talk about it. And it's unfortunate because to me, I'm not advocating for my school, I'm advocating for children of this county. And I think that each PTA needs to think about that when they're choosing whether or not to speak. So if only, I know Phelps Luck Elementary School is speaking out against it. They had 20 people show up at the Board of Education meeting a few weeks ago, mostly Spanish speaking families, and they had a translator when they were during their public forum presentation. And I feel like even if even if you find talking about something that's political in nature to be a little distasteful, I do feel like if you think that children are being harmed by a policy, that you should consider speaking out. So I'm a little disappointed that some PTAs have chosen to not speak about this issue. I'm continuing to reach out to PTAs. I did not reach out directly to the Howard County Education Association. If there's other recommendations, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to. I've written so many letters, I've lost count. I've made so many calls, I've lost count. I've talked to so many people, I've lost count. So I'm willing to at least bring it up. If people keep pushing back, I'm not the sort that's going to harass people.
I think teachers would be concerned. I'm a former teacher. You want your students to get to school and not miss school.
Sure.
The thought of a situation where a kid has an excuse like, I can't walk, it's raining, it's snowing, would be ridiculous. So I would reach out to them.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the
Thank you
presentation.
for inviting me. It was a pleasure to see you all and meet you. You have a lovely group here. It's nice to hear your ideas and your discussions.
Well, we hope you'll join our group, and that's what we're going to have our little slide. Let me show you our last slide. I'm not going to go into slide mode. I'll just share that. And it says, see you all next month. We hope that Monday, August 14th at 7, that we will have a meeting. Probably we're thinking about hybrid and hoping that some people, we might send out a little email on what they prefer, in person, via Zoom like today, or one or over the other. But sometimes we have done hybrid meetings, so we might go to that for our next meeting. And you can reach us at ourrevolutionhowardcounty@gmail.com. You can reach me at cat@ourrevolutionmarylandmd.com. And you can reach Jake. You probably already have his email. I'm not sure if we set up an OR email for Jake yet, but
no, we don't need one for me individually, but
No.
we do have a chapter email right there on the slide, ourrevolutionhowardcounty@gmail.com. And if people scan the QR code, you can follow us on social media, join our email list, become an official member. And by the way, the panel or the meeting next month in August is going to be a panel discussion around rent stabilization, which again is going to be the next big push that our group works on, hopefully with a coalition of other organizations. So that should be a good one next month, whether it's in person, hybrid, or whatever.
And for the young people who are in here, rent stabilization, not being able to afford to pay rent affects a lot of kids, because when your parents have to keep moving, that means you lose your friends and you're at a different school, et cetera, et cetera. So if you know of young people who are concerned with this, please let them know at your high schools.
But yeah, thank you, everybody.
And thank you for the great presentations from Lindsey and Emily and Corinne. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And have a happy 4th of July, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Take care.
And the
Yeah.
meeting.
Take care, everybody.